Okay, so this one's going to be a little bit of a longer one. It's your River Wye case study. Now, why do we have to study the River Wye? Well, we have to study the River Wye as a river landscape. So we have to know the geomorphic processes that operate in a river. We have to know the landforms it creates. And we have to know how human activity on the river, so anything that humans do to the river or around the river, how they affect the geomorphic processes and possibly the landforms. And then when we're looking at geomorphic processes, we're also looking at how the geology and weather and climate will affect in a river landscape. So I'm going to start you at the beginning, okay, because if I have to do this one more time, I might just scream. So a river basin, right? A large area of land, okay, that is drained by one main river and its tributaries, okay? Tributaries are tiny rivers that feed into a big long channel. So think of the River Thames, okay, drains the drainage basin of London, and you have the River Roding and the River Ingrebourne and all those little tiny rivers, the River Beam, and they all go into the River Thames. Okay. Now that area, that river basin, catchment area, all water that falls in that, unless it is intercepted by vegetation or, my mouth open to the sky or a sewer or anything like that, unless it's intercepted, goes eventually to the river basin, to the river channel and out to sea. Okay. Rivers flow from highland to lowland. And they tend to have three parts, okay? So you have the upper course of the river, the middle course of the river, and the lower course of the river. And different geomorphic processes act upon this river at different rates. So the source of the River Wye is at 2,500 feet, okay, in the mountains in Wales near Plynlimmon. Okay, we'll call Plynlimmon the start of your River Wye. And it has the highest rainfall in the UK, Plynlimmon, and it's gritstone and shale. Now the river descends very quickly. Now the river right at the top is very small, okay? And it gets wider and wider and wider as it goes. So high energy creates a steep-sided valley. So it erodes downwards vertically. And that creates these slopes. Now mass movement occurs on each side of the slope, mass movement, okay, sliding of material, so you get this nice V-shaped valley. Okay, its course up there hasn't been altered too much by humans, so there's not really any reservoirs built up there. The first town the river passes through is called Rheidar. Now Rheidar used to have waterfalls. Now, waterfalls are a landform that form in an upper course of the river. And I'm going to explain to you very simply how waterfalls form, okay? Waterfalls form when you have hard rock on top of soft rock. The water tends to not erode the hard rock, but will get in and start to erode the softer rock. This is called cap rock, the hard rock, and the soft rock underneath erodes. Over time, okay, you end up with a sort of a U, and the top of that cap rock will collapse, going into the plunge pool and slightly receding. And then it happens again over time. So you end up with a waterfall. This hard rock protecting this softer rock, and then you end up with this steep drop. And as it retreats, it forms a gorge. Now, the waterfalls actually got removed when they built the town's bridge, and they removed the waterfalls. So you just get sort of rapids now in Rheidar. Okay. Waterfalls still occur on several of the Wye's tributaries. So a named waterfall can be the Cledden Falls. I will go back over waterfall formation. But waterfalls are a landform created by erosion. Now, as the river comes down, okay, into sort of Hay-on-Wye, the middle course, you'll get less vertical erosion, a little bit more horizontal erosion occurring. So the river gets wider, it also gets deeper, okay, and it holds more water. and it starts to bend. Water will bend because it's trying to find the natural, easiest path. So you get meanders, the bend in a river. And what happens is the flow of water is faster on the outside of the channel and slower on the inside. Imagine like a waltzer. If you've ever been on a waltzer at the fairground and you're pushed right back and the energy is at the back, it's sort of moving faster. There's more energy on the outside bend than the inside bend. So you get erosion on the outside bend, which makes it nice and curvy, and you get deposition on the inside bend. This keeps happening, this deposition on the inside bend and erosion on the outside bend, until you end up with a really tight meander. And then the river goes, sod this, okay, and takes the path of least resistance right through, and that cut-off meander is called an oxbow lake. It dries up, and it's like some weird thing that we teach kids, okay, it's an oxbow lake. You tend to get them meanders form. They're erosion and depositional landform that form in the middle course of a river. Lateral erosion. Now, in the lower course of the river, you'll tend to find, so if we take around, I'm trying to think, Chepstow Way, I've just got a map in front of me. Yeah, sort of, Chepstow's sort of different because it's limestone, but let's just talk about sort of coming down from Hereford, okay? Below the city of Hereford, there's a floodplain, a wide flat area prone to flooding. It's created by lateral erosion widening the river and deposition of fine sediment through flooding. So the river floods, deposits sediment and then recedes, and then deposits sediment and then recedes. This is such fertile land, such good agricultural land, but obviously prone to flooding. As the river floods and flows outwards from the river channel, the flow has less energy, so it deposits the fine sediment being carried. The water drops heavier material first, so you get more sediment dropped close to the river's edge. After the river's flooded several times, that can build up to form levees. The problem is you have to have material in the river for that levee to form. And human activity, which we're going to come on to, okay, will have an impact on that. So what human activity is happening, Miss Blake? Well, I'm glad you asked. Urbanisation is a human activity, okay? If humans disappeared, cities wouldn't be built anymore. We wouldn't be building houses, okay? So urbanisation has happened. Settlements have been built at bridging points, and hard engineering has been put in place to protect those settlements. So they're putting in, so Hereford, Chepstow, they're actually putting in concrete levees and embankments to protect the settlements, but that reduces the erosion on both the meanders and the riverbanks, which means you have less sediment in the river. So then if it does flood downstream, natural levees won't form. Also, up in the upper course of the river, limestone quarrying. The removal of limestone makes the gradients of the valley steeper and increases the risk of mass movement and flooding. Further downstream, the Letton Lakes take some of the excess water during flood events. So they've built these lakes, these Letton Lakes, and that's to protect Hereford. Where they've planted trees in the upper course of the river, interception is actually reducing the flood risk. So one thing we do is reduce the amount of water that goes into the river. The risk of landslides and mass movement is reduced by that. Where riverbanks are stabilised, they can be so that we can use them for like walking or tourism and fishing. That ultimately helps settlements further downstream, but because it reduces the amount of river erosion, which reduces the amount of sediment being transported, which will then further reduce the amount of erosion occurring, because abrasion is when material in the river wears away at the riverbanks. But ultimately that means depositional features such as floodplains have less sediment available to construct them, and then we have to construct artificial levees. These questions, they really annoy me in the exam paper, because if I said to you, what do humans do that can reduce erosion, you'd be like, Oh, okay. We build walls, which means that the riverbanks do not get eroded. Or if I said, what do we do that reduces deposition of material? We build levees so that flooding doesn't occur, which will reduce deposition. If I said to you, explain to me how a waterfall is created, most you could say hard rock on top of soft rock, erosion, particularly abrasion and hydraulic action, erode the softer rock, that retreats, the cap collapses, falls, makes a plunge pool, retreats, gorge. Wah, 4 marks. The examiner is not going to ask those nice, easy questions. I'm sorry, I wish they would. They are going to say, for an erosional landform you've studied in a river landscape, explain how it's formed. That just means on a river, pick an erosional landform, waterfall, explain how it's formed. For a river landscape you've studied, explain how human activity interferes with geomorphic processes. You literally have to write, what do we do on the river? How would that perhaps affect erosion or deposition or transportation or weathering? For a river landscape you've studied, how does the rock type affect the landforms created? Well, the upper course of the river is harder rocks, it's mountains. Okay, so you tend to get vertical erosion, you get V-shaped valleys. In the lower course of the river, it's softer rock. You get a lot of lateral erosion, a lot of material eroded, wider rivers, deeper channels, bends, meanders. Honestly, with this one, I think it's just you have to stop panicking. You have to realise that they are not going to ask you anything that you don't know. So, how do you decode the question? We're going to be working on that. That was 12 minutes. And if I ever have to do this again, I might cry.